I'm just going to echo Chris's statement. Like, if you've ever been to one of our meetings, very little gets accomplished for the other buildings. It's the majority of the meeting is spent around Elderton. I don't know. I know I got a letter, I think on Friday, from a person from Ford City, kind of really trying to point that out to us, that there are other things that have to go on and have to take place, and we just seem to be ignoring everything and giving all the energy is focused on opening up this high school. So, you know, I've only been on the board 2 years, but that question, I mean, nothing is going to change. I'm fearful that, you know, my kids are going to go into that high school and have, you know, the same books, the same resources, the same tools, and that's just, I mean, to me, that's silly, you know, that long and nothing's changing. So.
Okay, my last question for you. All right, guys, spill the beans. Where is the super school? And where is it going to be built? And how are we going to pay for it?
This is, I'm not really sure where this super school is. It is truly a ploy. Back when the seat that I represent was open, I tried to get, what do they call it? I tried to get appointed. And at that point, I think probably what shut the door on me is I am, still am in favor of consolidation. But to Chris's point, and probably Joe's too, we can't afford it. The super school, if you want to call it that, I mean, you can put all of our high schools together, and to me, it still by definition doesn't qualify as a super school. But we don't have the money. We don't have the money to do any of that now. You know, it has kind of passed us by. We have to get our hands around kind of, our budget. We got to address this pension thing, and then we have to look at our buildings and figure out how are we going to keep them up and progressive and with the times. You know, and we can't even find the time to do that. So the super school thing, that is it's I don't know, it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, it's out there, but it would be fun to sit down and just put some scenarios together as to what, you know, what it would be if you could get just all your thoughts together, and like I say, we could shed the defensive tactics to try to avoid it. Let's work with something that, if we wanted to do that, what would we put it at? Run some numbers. And it is clearly a numbers game with that charrette. You know, it's numbers of students, square foot you need for a secondary school, how much it costs to build per square foot. And then, of course, when all the other mechanisms kick in, it's the athletic fields that are millions of dollars. Truth be told, you know, we don't really need, we wouldn't really have to have all that first off. There's facilities at Ford City that are been fairly updated that could be utilized. They're not at the school, but you might just need a practice field or something at the school. Wouldn't have to all be taken on at one time. If you wanted to try to manage it into your budget, it wouldn't have to be to bite it all off at one time kind of thing. And you know, first, if you were going to try to afford something like that, then you've got to see how much you can save by changing the building structures that you have now. How much are you going to save by elimination of some resources that you don't need? All your maintenance fees, your staffing costs. What do you save? And it gives you an idea of how much you can spend if you're going to try to do it without a tax increase. Or if you hey, let's do a fund project and let's see what it would cost, and let's tell the taxpayers, would you agree to this amount of millage tax increase if we were going to build this school? Just to see what the reaction would be. But as for where the super school's at, now I like to tell everybody, I said, we actually have one, but you don't really think where it is. It kind of gets overlooked, and that's the Lenape-Vo-Tech, because Lenape-Vo-Tech now graduates more kids than any one of our high schools. So I always like to say that's our super school that we had these outrageous numbers of graduating classes that, we just couldn't foresee by anybody, and there's just no way that you can manage that. But we don't really. The super school, that term is farthest from the truth, because it certainly wouldn't be anything. We could have a super school, but it wouldn't necessarily be a super school.
I just agree with everything that they've said. I think it would be, I think, Joe, you kind of alluded to it, I think it would be kind of interesting to have and I think one of the questions is about a referendum, why wasn't there a referendum vote, but I think it would be really interesting as a district, and it could be part of, just information gathering of the opinions about our surrounding community, but to have a non-binding referendum, just a question on the ballot that says, or asks people, how do you feel about, building a new school where at least two schools would be combined, because we do have a large school district, so I cannot, in any situation, I can't envision one school for the entire 435 square miles. I mean, that doesn't seem realistic, but to have two, I definitely could entertain that idea. But it would be interesting to see how everyone feels in the district about that. So maybe if some of the other board members don't feel as threatened or as fearful of it, maybe that's a possibility if enough of the community can bring that up to get that added. Like I said, not to make any decisions necessarily on that, but just to kind of get a general feel from the public how they feel about it.
We have a question from the audience concerning that. How many students is Lenape Tech graduating?
I think it's around 130. I'm going to allude to Todd in about 200.
200.
Okay. So it's 200 in graduating class.
Okay. Well, the first batch of my questions. Why wasn't there a referendum vote?
I had brought this up at the meeting because everyone, even back when we went to close it, we were being challenged by Hero and others in that area to do a referendum. And at that time, we were moving forward with trying to get the savings. And I think, we have a vote and we turned it down or something. But so now, obviously with closing it, same thing, other side saying, why don't we have a referendum? So I checked into it. And if you talk to the Board of Elections down at the courthouse, there's nothing on the books that allows to get a referendum. You have to meet certain criteria, and this just doesn't apply. So you can't, even if back then we wanted to have a referendum, or the board would have voted to have a referendum, we wouldn't have been able to do it anyhow. So the whole referendum thing is smoke. We can't have one. The closing or opening of a school doesn't qualify under the referendum guidelines. So, and that's whether it's binding or non-binding, according to the elections office. We wouldn't have been able to do it. So even if the board would have passed it back then, or we would have passed it just recently, by the time we went to move on it, they would have told us you can't do it.
What were the reasons given by the board to have Lee Price dismissed as solicitor?
From open meeting, Joe.
What's that?
The reasons that were given in open session.
Yeah, what the biggest reason was that the people that were, I guess, listed on some of the lawsuits that were recently filed weren't comfortable with his firm as representation. They didn't feel that they'd be represented adequately. Although the move that they made, actually, when we had the special meeting that evening, I had thought that they were going to hire a different attorney firm just to represent them in those cases, to represent the board and those 6 named board members on those cases. But and they could have done that without, they didn't have to terminate Lee Price's firm and hire the other firm to do the district matters and the lawsuit. So it didn't have to take place that way. But they felt that they weren't going to be represented adequately.